Thank you for the opportunity to tell you about our trial. It's a phase 1b, phase 2 treatment of patients who have steroid refractory chronic graft-versus-host disease. These are patients who underwent allogeneic transplant, presumably for an underlying heme malignancy. And as your audience knows, about half the people develop chronic graft-versus-host disease, that detrimental donor immune response against the gut, the skin, the liver. And half of those patients who develop chronic GVHD end up on steroids for life, essentially. There's no approved therapies. There have been hopes and glimmers of some activity, but we're very excited to bring forward what we think is a very significant response rate. In the study of 42 patients with steroid refractory chronic GVHD, having done the phase 1, we settled on the dose of 420 milligrams. That's a standard CLL dose, and all patients received that dose. The overall response rate, considering all patients treated, was 67%. That's partial and complete, and a third of the patients had complete responses. Median time on drug was over a year. There are still more than 10 patients on drug at this time. The adverse events are always a concern. The most frequent ones are those that your audience is used to, treating patients with CLL, mantle cell, who have been receiving ibrutinib. That's the usual: fatigue, malaise, cramps, some lower problems with bleeding is maybe unique to the ibrutinib over the other TKIs. So we had no problems with cardiac toxicity. We had no problems with hemorrhage. Any bruising was mild bruising like you'd see in people on steroids or an aspirin. The serious adverse event, though, is still 52%. That's the same as what was seen in the early indication trials of ibrutinib for CLL, or in our own experience looking at patients after transplant receiving ibrutinib for relapse, or even, for that matter, people receiving steroids for the treatment of chronic GVHD. We saw responses across all organ systems. It's encouraging to be able to say that this seems that we're hitting the underlying problems of pathogenesis in chronic GVHD, and our biomarker studies were highly suggestive that we're hitting pathways that are really implicated in the treatment of chronic GVHD. So there were no unexpected serious adverse events. As in this very heavily treated and immune-compromised patient population, our biggest concerns are always the infectious risks. While we hope that we will never see serious cardiac events, as have happened in an instance maybe 1 to 2% in the treatment with general ibrutinib, I think ultimately that luck will run out. That is something that's hard to predict. Patients with arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation, we were encouraged that while we didn't see that problem so far, the management of those side effects with ibrutinib have been very successful in the malignant patient population. We don't think that that's going to be our major safety concerns going forward. We are going forward. That's the most exciting news. We've already begun a large double-blind, randomized, controlled trial, bringing the therapy forward to the treatment of new-onset chronic graft-versus-host disease. Of course, that's different than what we did treat here with patients who had established more than a year post the initial development of chronic GVHD. There's a slight risk that this is a different situation. I don't think so. I think that the benefits of ibrutinib that targets the Burton tyrosine kinase and blocks the alloreactive B cell from the donor, as well as the IL-2 inducible T cell kinase, are playing pivotal roles in the development of chronic GVHD. In fact, we're also doing a series of trials, 3 investigator-initiated studies, to see if we can prevent chronic GVHD as well. The large randomized controlled trial is going to be international. It's 190 patients to be treated. There will be lots of additional ancillary studies going on, understanding the biology of this treatment as well. So that's a placebo-controlled, high-dose steroids plus or minus ibrutinib with some stratifications, and it's the development and resolution of chronic GVHD afterwards. It was the earlier presentation of this study at the European Bone Marrow Transplant. The data from that presentation last spring that went to the FDA. The FDA granted the breakthrough designation status in June of 2016, recognizing chronic GVHD as an orphan disease. So this data is already being, in a rolling fashion, presented to the FDA. We expect and hope for a positive decision early in 2017, but I'm just the clinical investigator.